And hello again, and here we are back in my garage working on the Z650/1170 project. So let me put my cup of tea down, and in this video we're going to start the rather tedious process of wiring up the bike. It's something I've been putting off for quite a long time, but I can't put it off anymore because the bodywork's about to go off for paint, so I'm sort of running out of other things to do. As I thought through what's got to happen, I made a start by drawing out a basic diagram, a wiring diagram for the bike. And on this particular bike, like most of my bikes, I'm using the MotoGadget M-Unit, which sits here behind the side panel, and that makes life a lot easier. There's a lot less wiring to do, and it sort of cleans up the whole wiring of the bike completely. So that's the sort of brain, if you like, of the system. So everything comes to it and goes from it. Well, almost everything. I mean, the alternator doesn't, but yeah, most things do. So I went through what I've got, and I realised there's a few components that I've not yet got, and there's about two or three things. One of those is the starter motor relay, sometimes called a solenoid. Haven't got one of them, so I've got it on order. It's just a generic one. It's like £13, nothing to worry about there. The only issue is, where's it going to go? Somewhere under the seat, no doubt. Next up, I need a horn. Pretty simple again, £15 odd. You know, horn from Hella, decent quality. That can go on the bike. And I also needed a set of indicators. Now, I've gone through every possible option out there when it comes to indicators. I didn't want LED for various reasons, and I didn't want little micro ones because I don't think it'll suit the bike. So I've been looked through an awful lot of options on the internet. I actually bought these from Alchemy, sort of quite expensive shop actually, but they do sell decent stuff. And these are black, plastic coated, kind of squarish. Not sure you can see that. I might zoom in a little bit. And I thought it would suit the bike. And so to fit these indicators to the bike, at the front it's not too difficult because the indicator bolts are also used to hold the headlamp shell in place, so that's pretty straightforward. But at the back I've got no mounts at all, so I have to make something up. But anyway, let's start off and fit these to the front and see how they look. And so, as you can see, I've just fitted these two indicators, and I must say I'm pretty happy with the result. They're sort of not too big, not too small, and they kind of fit the bike quite well. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with that. Let's just spin it around a little bit. Yeah, I was a bit worried that maybe they would kind of be a bit of a eyesore, but no, they're okay, they're okay. So yeah, I'll call that a win. So now I've got to move on and work out how to mount the rear indicators and of course the rear lamp. And so moving on to the back of the bike then, I've got to make a bracket that will both hold the rear lamp and the two indicators in the correct spot. And that's quite tricky because, yeah, I've got these two mounts here on the frame, so the bracket's got to come back and hold the rear lamp in place. And in fact the rear lamp's got these three mounting bolts which hold it all together, which we'll use them to mount it to the bracket, something like that. Whereas the indicators will have to go a bit further back. They've got to go sort of down here behind the place where the mount bolts to. So yeah, it's quite a bit of a weird bracket I've got to make here. And also because it's underneath the bike, I won't make it out of aluminium or steel, I'll make it out of stainless steel. So that makes life a bit more complicated because stainless is the right paint to drill and bend and cut. But anyway, we'll work something out, and hopefully it'll look okay when it's done. And so moving on then, the next part to consider is this thing, and this is the rectifier stroke regulator for the bike. Now the only thing you've got to worry about when it comes to mounting one of these is that they don't like to be too hot, so putting it close to the engine isn't ideal. And in an ideal world you should have a nice flow of fresh air, cool air over it as you ride along. So having looked around the bike, I've decided to fit this thing behind the right hand side panel and bolt it to the stainless electrics box that's behind there. And the reason for that is because, well, first of all it's a good place to put it, but also because I'm not having a big bulky air box behind the carbs, I'm just having individual pods. And that means there's plenty of room around the area and behind the side panel to let the fresh air flow through and keep this thing nice and cool. And so now all I've got to do is drill two holes behind the side panel in the electrics box, and this can be mounted. Also, I've got to worry about this thing. Now this weird looking thing is the GPS sensor for the Speedo. something I've not actually used before. And I bought it because it means you don't have to have a wire or a cable going from Speedo down to the front wheel, so it cleans up the front wheel. Now, having done a bit of research on this thing, some people said, oh, you've got to fit it so it's got a clear view of the sky, because obviously it's looking up to a GPS signal up above Earth, but this actually says you can fit it underneath the dashboard in a car, of all places. And the company makes it, it's called V3 Instruments. It tends to specialise, as it turns out, in marine technology, sort of GPS and that sort of thing for boats. So hopefully we shouldn't have a problem with this doing it on the bike. And actually just check now, and this cable is, let's see, well, that long, what's that, about 4 feet long, just over a metre. So I think it's going from the Speedo, yeah, it's long enough so that I can fit it, another thing to fit to the electrics box. I can just drill a hole, mount it on, and we're fine. So now what I've got to do, I've just got to do it. So we'll come back in a little while and we'll see how we're getting on. And now we've pushed the bike outside, since it's turned into quite a lovely day. And while I've been out here, I've now drilled and mounted the GPS sender here on the electrics box next to the M-Unit, so that's pretty easy. So my next job is going to be to extend these 3 yellow wires here, which go from the alternator and have to go to the rectifier. And so now I've connected up these pins, ready for these to go on the multi-pin connector for the rectifier. I've also now sleeved these yellow wires in this kind of stretchy outer sleeve, which I quite prefer. It works quite well. It's like a sort of snake, it expands as you push more wires through it. The only problem with that is that each end where you cut it, it kind of frays. I'm not sure you can see that, it frays. So to get around that, I'll just put some heat shrink on it, and when I know I'm finished, I'll just heat up the heat shrink and it seals it all nice and tight. So yeah. Okay, so this area is starting to get quite complicated. We've got the wire for the GPS sender, we've got the wires for the ignition, these go to the coils, and here we've got, of course, the multi-pin connector for the rectifier. So I've now sorted out the 3 yellow wires. Well, I've got to sort out the black, the red and the brown. So I think what we'll do is we'll find some brown wire and get one of those pins on there, ditto red, ditto black. Now the red's going to go to the positive terminal of the battery, so that's quite a short wire. Ditto the black is going to the negative of the battery, and the brown's a funny one, that's the sender. It takes a 12 volt power from the battery back to tell it when the battery's overcharging or undercharging and so on, so you need that. It's got a little short brown wire to find its way down to the M-Unit, so that's pretty straightforward. And now here we have those other 3 wires installed in the multi-pin plug, so that goes in there. Now all these are quite short because it's just got to go to the battery, and one goes to the M-Unit, so no great problem there. And so moving on then to the front of the bike, and as you can see we've got lots of wires to worry about. So these are from the MotoGadget switches, they go back to the M-Unit, that's not such a big problem. And of course we've got all these wires from the instrument pod, because we've got the Speedo sensor, we've got the Tacho, that's got to go to the coils, we've got the neutral light, oil pressure light and so on, power, earth and lots of things. Good news is that in the box that the unit came in, we've got some more wires here. Now these unfortunately aren't long enough to go from here to the back of the bike, but it's a start, isn't it? It's a start. So we've got all the colour coded wires with the appropriate bullet connectors, so at least gives me a start, Oh, and also of course don't forget the indicators and of course the headlamp as well, but they'll be connected inside the headlamp shell, keep things nice and simple. Yeah, so yeah, seems quite complicated at first, but I think if you sit down and go through it carefully, which I've already done, then hopefully it shouldn't be too bad. And so let's get started, but first a cup of tea I think. Now here we are back in the garage, and it's the next day, so we have been making some progress. So before I show you what I've been doing, I thought I'd show you first of all this documentation you get when you buy these various instruments. So you've got quite complicated diagrams here, wiring diagram for the instrument pod, Tacho, Speedo, that sort of thing. You've got another one for the GPS unit, another one for the switches and so on, as well as one for the rectifier and whatnot. So what I've done is, some time ago, about a week or so ago, before I even got started on the bike, I drew up my own little wiring diagram on a A3 size piece of paper. You need it that big to fit everything in. So yeah, it's all in pencil, it's all pretty neat, well, as neat as I can get. And there might be some errors in this, so it's pencil, I can just rub it out and rejig it or just draw it out all over again. And the heart of this matter is this bit here, which is the M-Unit, which on the bike is very, very small, so it makes my life a lot easier. Just blow it up so I know which hole is doing what, because you can't really read it on that. It's so tiny. You need a magnifying glass to see it. And in fact, I have got one somewhere. Yeah, I'm getting old now, so I need a magnifying glass sometimes, which comes in very handy. Oh, and I just realised that you can't see the contents of my wiring diagram on the video, so here it is, hopefully a bit clearer. So we've got the M-Unit here in the middle, all the wires going from it, all the wires going to it, start motor, rectifier down here. Oh, here we've got the front headlamp, indicators and so on, GPS unit. Here's all the complicated bits for the coil and so on. And where I need to get it a bit bigger, I'll just spin it over, and yeah, you can see here I've just made it a bit bigger so I can see what's going on. I know which colour does what, and that makes life a lot easier. And so let me bring the camera around and you can see progress so far. And so starting from the front of the bike, I've got the wiring sorted out now for the headlamp and the two indicators. Then I'll sleeve and go back to the middle of the bike. Ditto for the two switches on the handlebars, and also of course for the instrument pod. Now the instrument pod's a bit odd because it's got so many wires. These are them here, two little groups of them. And the good news is it looks like these wires that I got with the instrument within the box might well just be long enough to reach the M-Unit in places where it needs to go. So that's pretty good. And ditto these as well. Not quite long enough, but that's not a great problem. And so moving back towards the middle of the bike, I've now finished wiring up the alternator and also the starter motor. Now that gave me some questions because I'm using this outrigger system so that the wires can't go in the standard route. They normally go back and up behind the sprocket. Can't do that with my bike, so instead they've gone down and behind the frame tubes and then up here. So that's all done now, and in fact the rectifier's now got all its wires all done. And so now looking at the middle of the bike, and in particular the electrics box, you can see I've got a lot of wires here that are far too long. And that's because I don't yet have the battery in place, so I don't quite know where the positive and negative terms will be. You know, it'll be that way or that way, not sure yet. So I can't quite cut these to get them to the right size, but that's fine. I will buy a battery quite soon, not quite sure which one yet. Yeah, so far so good. As you see, it's all looking quite rough at the moment, but all these wires now have a home. I know where they're going to go. I just can't cut them all down to the correct size yet. But most of these are going to end up going to the M-Unit here. So, you know, just got to work it out, get a nice flow, get them bent in just in the right way, get them cut, and we should be okay. Oh, and one more thing. I'd like to point out that when I wire up a bike, I don't do it the standard way, the way say a factory would do it or the way most people do it. And by that what I mean is all the wires here going from the front of the bike down the spine and back would normally be kept in one big bundle, all wrapped up in tape, you know, all nice and neat. I don't do that. As you can see here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 separate little sleeved bundles of wires. And the reason for that is that I'd like to keep all electrics quite modular. And by that I mean each of these bundles do a separate job. So one might be the indicators, one might be the headlamp, one might be the instrument pod, and one might be the switches on the handlebars. And the reason for that is because I know in the future I may well change things. I mean, right now I'd like to change the instrument pod from 1 to 2 to sort of follow the classic Kawasaki Z look, but I'm not changing it now, it's too late. So in the future I might change that. So if I bundle all these wires in one great big sleeved bundle, it would make it quite difficult to just pull out the wires I need when I want to change this one thing. I'd have to rip it all apart and start again. Whereas in my way, being quite modular, I can just take one of these off and leave everything else as is and not worry about messing about with the wiring for the headlamp, the indicators and the switches and so on. So that's something that I do. Whether that's a good way or a bad way, I don't know, but that's kind of the way that I do my electrics. And so moving on then, I've just had a delivery of two things I've been waiting for. And the first one is in here, and this is the horn made by Heller. Good make, no complaints at all, cost about £15, and well worth paying a little bit more to get something of quality rather than the cheaper stuff from China. And the second thing that's arrived is here. This is a little small 12 volt UASA battery. Now obviously this is not going to work on the bike, it won't start the bike, but they're so damn handy to have when you're checking out the circuits on the bike. They don't have a huge amount of ampage, so you're not going to burn out anything too expensive, hopefully, if you get things wrong. But you can use it for testing out just about everything on the bike, because it's 12 volts obviously. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to trying this out. And in fact, the first thing I'll try out with this is the horn, once I've got it fitted. And so I found a home for the horn right there, that's fine. So now I've got the battery here, my little test battery, and this is its first test. I'll just put this on the connections and we'll see what happens. And hopefully it'll make a noise. Let's see. Here we go. First of all, here goes. God, that is loud. My ears are ringing. Yeah, that works very well. So we'll call that a win. And that battery is going to be very helpful in the future. And now I've just hit one of those frustrating problems you get when you're building a one-off bike. And what we've got here is one of the coils, which I've just finished wiring up. And I've come to refit its mounts. I had to unbolt it just to get access. So when I've come to fit this spacer here, guess what? It doesn't fit because this screw which holds in the wire gets in the way. So flipping heck. What to do. So I guess I could take this to Jeff's and have it machined down on the lathe, but no time for that. So instead what I've done is I've taken it and I've filed a flat on it using my hand file and put this in the vise. So now hopefully this won't touch. It can't touch of course because then it might earth out the signal, which we don't want. So it's going to be damn close either way, but let's see if this will work now. Let's get him back in there. There we go. Yeah, okay, I've got about a millimetre's clearance there, but 1 mil is quite enough. So having done one, I've now got to do the other side as well. And now, as you can see, the main battery to the bike's just arrived. It's a Varta, and it looks a little bit smaller than you might imagine. And that's because it's only, let's see, the code is a TTZ14S. And normally you'll get a 20S for a bike like mine, or rather the engine like mine, because the GPZ11B, this engine here, would normally require a battery big enough to turn it over, which would be something like a YTX 20 UACER, and this is a step down from that. But the reason why I bought it is because this battery has a CCA, which is cold cranking amps, the same as the original battery fitted to a GPZ 1100B, and the cold cranking amps means it's got plenty of power to start the engine, which is the main thing. So that's why I went for this one. The battery box is made big enough to take the 20, but I went for this one for the time being. Now if it turns out it's not big enough, then fair enough, I'll just go and buy a bigger one. But as it is, I think that one might do quite well. So moving on then, as you can see at the front of the bike here, I've now finished off tidying up and sleeving all the wires, going from the front of the bike back to the main sort of control for the bike here on the M-Unit. So looking at the centre of the bike then, this is the heartbeat of it here, this is the heart, the M-Unit. It might look like a right mess now, but in fact I'm getting near the end of wiring up the bike, because all I've got to do now is cut these and find a home for them on the M-Unit, which is quite simple to do. Just press a button and the wirings go straight in. So my job now is going to be to cut these to the right length, make it all look as neat as I can, get the M-Unit sorted out, get all the wires in there, and then test it all out. However, this video is already quite long, so I think we'll cover wiring up the M-Unit and testing out all the different systems in the next video. It's also because there's a rather loud birthday party next door for the kids, so you can hear that in the background. So anyway, we'll continue on the wiring in the next video, and so until then, thanks for watching and cheers.